My family erased me for 8 years. They changed the locks while I was still standing on the porch, told me I was a burden that the family could no longer afford to carry, and drove away without looking back. But everything changed the night they walked through the front doors of my boutique hotel in Nashville, demanded the best suite in the building, and my father slapped a legal document on my front desk that he believed would destroy everything I had spent 8 years building from nothing. What he did not know was that the moment he made that threat, he had already lost. My name is Sophia, and I am 32 years old. I am the sole owner and general manager of the Hartwell Inn, a 12-room luxury boutique hotel located in the heart of East Nashville. Before I go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you are watching from right now. And if you have ever been underestimated by the very people who were supposed to believe in you the most, hit like and subscribe, because you are going to want to hear every single word of what I am about to tell you. It was a Thursday evening in late October, and the Hartwell Inn was running at full capacity. Every suite was occupied. The small private bar off the lobby was warm and crowded, with guests sipping Tennessee bourbon, and the scent of cedar wood and vanilla from our signature candles drifted through the corridors. I was behind the front desk reviewing the next morning's checkout schedule when my front desk associate, Bree, leaned toward me with a tight, uncertain expression on her face. "There is a group at the entrance," she said quietly. "They do not have a reservation, but the man is insisting you will make room for them personally." I did not think much of it at first. Walk-ins happened occasionally, and turning away guests was never my preference. I smoothed my blazer, stepped out from behind the desk, and walked toward the entrance. The moment I saw them, my stomach dropped. Standing in the amber glow of the lobby chandelier were 4 people I had not spoken to in 8 years. My father, Gerald, was front and center, wearing a charcoal sport coat and the same arrogant expression he had worn my entire childhood. Behind him stood my mother, Patricia, clutching her designer purse the way she always did when she was nervous but trying not to show it. To his left was my younger brother, Derek, wearing a brand new jacket with the tags still barely invisible under the collar. And beside Derek was his wife, Vanessa, scanning the lobby ceiling with the critical squint of someone who was already deciding what to complain about. My feet stopped moving for just a moment. 8 years of silence. 8 years of not a single phone call, not a birthday text, not even a forwarded piece of mail. And now here they were, standing on my imported tile floors, acting as though no time had passed at all. I took one slow breath, forced every emotion off my face, and walked toward them. My father looked me up and down the way he always had, like he was calculating whether I was worth his time. There was no hello, no softness. He reached inside his jacket and pulled out a folded envelope, and he placed it flat on the top of my front desk with the deliberate weight of a man who believed he was holding something powerful. "We need to talk," he said, privately. Vanessa had already wandered toward the seating area near the fireplace, picking up a small, decorative piece from the side table and inspecting the bottom of it with raised eyebrows. Derek stood with his hands in his pockets, rocking slightly on his heels, looking everywhere except at me. I looked at the envelope, but did not touch it. I looked back at my father. "We are at full occupancy tonight," I said evenly. "If you would like to discuss something, I can give you 15 minutes in the private sitting room off the lobby." My father smiled, the kind of smile that was not actually a smile. He picked up the envelope and tucked it back inside his jacket. "15 minutes is all we will need," he said. I led them through the side corridor and into the private sitting room, a small, elegant space with 2 velvet sofas, a brass floor lamp, and a frosted glass partition that separated it from the rest of the lobby. I did not offer them drinks. I stood at the far end of the room and waited. My father settled into the sofa like he owned it, spreading his arms along the back cushions. My mother sat beside him, perching on the edge of the seat, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Derek dropped into the chair near the window. Vanessa remained standing, doing a slow circle of the room, touching the curtain fabric, tilting her head at the artwork on the wall. "Not bad," she said, finally. "A little small for a hotel lobby, but the aesthetic is passable." I said nothing. My father pulled the envelope from his jacket again and set it on the low table between us. He tapped it twice with 2 fingers, the way he used to tap his watch when he was trying to communicate that you were wasting his time. "I will be direct," he said. Derek and Vanessa are expecting their first child. They have been trying to launch a business for 2 years, and they have not been able to secure the backing they need from traditional lenders. Your brother deserves a real opportunity, Sophia. He deserves a chance to build something. You have something here. You have done well for yourself. I will give you that. So here is what we are proposing. You sign over 35% of the equity in this hotel to Derek. He becomes a silent partner with a guaranteed annual distribution. It is a simple arrangement, and it gives your brother the foundation he needs to provide for his family. He leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes fixed on mine. If you refuse, he continued, I will make a phone call tonight to Thomas Calloway. You know the name. Thomas owns this entire block of East Nashville commercial property. He and I have been doing business together for 11 years. He is a close personal friend. All I have to do is pick up that phone and describe the noise complaints, the parking violations, and the code issues I have observed tonight, and Thomas will have cause to review your commercial lease first thing tomorrow morning. You could be looking at a lease termination before the weekend. So you can do this the easy way, or I can make one call. He sat back again and gave me that same flat, unaffected look. He was certain of his power. He had walked in here with a script he had probably rehearsed in the car, and he was delivering it exactly as planned. My mother reached across and touched his arm. She looked at me with her most practiced expression of maternal sadness. Sophia, please. We are not here to fight. We just want the family to be whole again. Derek needs this. You have so much already. Sharing a small piece of what you have built is not too much to ask of a sister. Derek finally looked up. He had the same uncomfortable expression he always wore when our parents pushed him into a confrontation he did not fully want to have. He cleared his throat. We have a baby coming, he said simply. That is all. Vanessa turned from the wall and looked at me with her arms crossed. I know this feels sudden, she said, her voice carrying the particular kind of sweetness that is not actually sweet at all. But honestly, Sophia, you were handed certain advantages too. Your grandmother left resources that benefited this whole family. It is not unreasonable to expect some reciprocity. And there it was. 8 years of silence, and within 5 minutes, they had circled right back to the wound they carved in the first place. I was 24 years old when my grandmother passed away. Her name was Ruth, and she was the only person in my family who saw me clearly. She had spent 30 years working in textile manufacturing, saving quietly and consistently, living simply, refusing to let anyone tell her what her money was for. When she died, she left a trust of $90,000 in my name, designated specifically for my education and professional development. She had told me herself, 2 weeks before she passed, that she wanted me to build something of my own. 4 days after the funeral, my father sat me down and told me that the family needed to access the trust to cover Derek's personal debts and fund a startup he was launching with 2 of his college friends. He told me it was temporary. He told me it was family. He told me that the money was sitting idle while my brother was drowning, and that a good daughter and a good sister would sign the paperwork. I said no. 3 days later, I came home from a shift at the coffee shop where I was working to find my suitcases on the front porch and a new keypad lock on the door. My father opened the front door, looked at me with complete calm, and told me that if I could not support my family, I was no longer part of it. He went back inside. My mother watched from the hallway and did not say a word. The door closed. I stood on that porch with 2 suitcases and $62 in my checking account, and I understood with absolute clarity that everything I would ever have in this life, I was going to have to build myself. I looked at my father now across the velvet sofa and the low table with his folded envelope sitting on top of it, and I felt something I had not expected to feel. Not anger, not grief, a kind of cold, surgical clarity that settled into my chest like a key turning in a lock. You want me to sign 35% of my business over to Derek, I said. My father nodded. That is correct. And if I do not, you will call Thomas Calloway and have my commercial lease reviewed. He did not nod this time. He simply looked at me with absolute certainty. I stood up slowly. I straightened my blazer. I looked at each of them once, briefly, and then I said, "Give me a few minutes. I will be right back." I walked out of the sitting room and back through the corridor to the front desk. Bree was watching me with wide eyes. I gave her a small, reassuring nod and picked up my phone. I sent a single text message to my operations manager, Len, asking him to pull up the file I had labeled contingency 6 months ago and bring it to the front desk. I had prepared for something like this. Not this exact scenario, perhaps, but some version of it. When you have been through what I went through, you learn that preparedness is not paranoia, it is self-respect. While I waited, I walked back into the sitting room. My family had settled in more comfortably. Vanessa had found a spot on the second sofa and was scrolling through her phone. Derek was examining the artwork on the wall with the mild curiosity of someone killing time. My mother was whispering something to my father, and he was nodding with his eyes half closed. "While I have you here," I said, stepping back into the center of the room, "I would like to ask you something." My father looked up. "Where exactly have the four of you been for the last 8 years? A pause. My mother blinked. "What kind of question is that?" my father said, his tone shifting slightly. "I think it is a fairly straightforward question," I said. 8 years. No phone calls, no messages, not one attempt to find out whether I was alive or sleeping in my car or eating. And now you are here, in my building, asking me to sign over a third of my business. I am genuinely curious what changed." My mother opened her mouth. "You made it very clear you wanted nothing to do with us, Sophia. You refused to help your family when they needed you most. We gave you space to cool down." I did not raise my voice. I simply looked at her. "You watched your husband put my suitcases on the porch," I said. "You stood in the hallway. You did not hand me a coat. It was 40 degrees outside." She looked away. Her jaw tightened. My father sat up straighter. "This is not a productive direction for this conversation," he said. "What is done, is done. What matters right now is that Derek needs support and you are in a position to provide it. The question is whether you are willing to act like part of this family or not." I heard footsteps in the corridor behind me. Len appeared at the doorway, holding a manila folder. I crossed the room, took the folder from him with a quiet thank you, and walked back to the center of the sitting room. "Let me share something with all of you," I said. My father watched the folder with the same faint suspicion I had expected. He was a man who understood the weight of paperwork. He had spent his career in real estate consulting, and he knew that certain documents carried certain consequences. He could not see what was inside, but his posture shifted almost imperceptibly. I opened the folder and placed the first document on the table, on top of his envelope, deliberately. "This is a property deed," I said, "for this building and the 3 adjacent commercial units on this block of East Nashville." My father frowned. "What does that have to do with anything?" "It has everything to do with your phone call," I said. "You told me you were going to contact Thomas Calloway tonight and ask him to review my commercial lease. You said Thomas owns this entire block. He owns the premier commercial properties in this district," my father said, his voice still carrying that edge of certainty, but something flickering behind his eyes now. "He owned them," I corrected, "until 14 months ago." A beat of silence. "Thomas Calloway listed this block as part of a portfolio sale after his second divorce and the restructuring of his investment holdings. I had been watching the East Nashville commercial market for 3 years by that point. I had a relationship with a commercial broker who alerted me the moment the listing went private. I made an all-cash offer within 48 hours. The sale closed in 3 weeks," I said quietly, looking directly at my father. "I own this building. I own the parking lot outside. I own the 3 commercial units on either side of this block. There is no lease for you to threaten, because I am not a tenant. I am the owner. Thomas Calloway has no authority over this property, or over me. He has not had that authority for 14 months. The room went completely still. My mother made a small sound, somewhere between a gasp and a swallowed breath. Derek stopped looking at the artwork and turned slowly to face the table. Vanessa lowered her phone to her lap and stared at me with an expression I had not seen on her face before. My father stared at the deed on the table. His neck had gone a deep, blotchy red. He opened his mouth once, closed it, and then opened it again. "That is not possible," he said. I pulled the second document from the folder. "This is the Articles of Organization for the holding company that purchased the property. Meridian Property Group, LLC. Registered with the Tennessee Secretary of State. I am the sole managing member." I own 100% of the shares. There is no board, no partner, no silent investor, just me. My father stared at the documents. Then he looked up at me, and I watched something happening behind his eyes. The absolute certainty he had walked in with was cracking, and something uglier was rising to fill the space beneath it. Vanessa shifted on the sofa. She set her phone face down on the cushion beside her. Her eyes moved between the documents and my father, rapidly, calculating. Derek rubbed the back of his neck. He looked at the floor. My father reached for his own phone. His hand was not steady. He was scrolling through his contacts with the kind of urgency that looks calm on the surface but is anything but. "It does not matter," he said, his voice dropping into a register I recognized from childhood, the low, controlled tone he used when he was about to do something irreversible. "Callaway is not the only connection I have in this city. I have spent 11 years building relationships in the Nashville real estate market. I can make calls tomorrow morning that will make your business unviable in this district. I know the development board. I know the zoning commission. I know people who make things difficult for properties that are not aligned with the right interests. You may own the building, Sophia, but you do not own this market, and you do not own your reputation. You are threatening to damage my business through municipal connections," I said. "I am telling you how the real world works," he said. My mother touched his arm. "Gerald, maybe we should just—" He shook her off. "What is it going to be, Sophia?" His voice had gone fully cold now. "You sign the equity agreement tonight, or I start making calls first thing tomorrow." I had been prepared for this, too. I reached into the folder and removed the third document. This one I walked around the table and placed directly in front of him, so he could read every line. "Are you familiar with a commercial property on Demonbron Street?" I asked. "The 10-story mixed-use building between the marketing district and the arts corridor?" His eyes went to the document. I watched them scan the heading. His jaw tightened, but he did not look up at me. "The building recently changed ownership," I said. "The previous owners were a regional development group that had been over-leveraged for several years. When the interest rate environment shifted, they needed to sell quickly and quietly. They needed a cash buyer who could close without a bank timeline. I made an offer on a Friday afternoon and the deal closed the following month." My father's hand pressed flat against the table. "Your commercial consulting firm, Holloway & Associates, has occupied Suite 810 of that building for the past 6 years," I continued. "Your 5-year anchor lease expired 18 months ago. Because your firm has been operating on reduced margins for several quarters, you were not able to commit to a new long-term contract. You have been on month-to-month tenancy since then." He finally looked up. His face had gone the color of old paper. "I own the building on Demonbron Street," I said. "I have owned it for 4 months, which means I am not only your hotel, I am also your office." The silence that followed was so complete I could hear the faint music from the bar on the other side of the lobby. Derek stood up from his chair. He took 2 steps toward the window, turned around, and looked at our father with an expression that was somewhere between shock and something harder to name. Vanessa had gone very still. Her eyes were fixed on me, and for the first time since she had walked through my front doors, she was looking at me without condescension. My mother pressed her fingers to her lips. My father did not move. He stared at the document in front of him, and I watched him doing the calculation. He was running through the implications, one by one, the way a man does when he realizes the architecture of a plan he believed was solid has collapsed entirely beneath him. "I have a certified copy of the current tenant roll for the Demonbron building," I said. "Your firm is listed on the 8th floor under a month-to-month agreement. Under Tennessee commercial property law, a month-to-month tenant can receive a 30-day notice of lease modification with a standard change of terms." I reached into the folder one final time and placed a single sheet of white paper beside the deed. "That is a formal notice of a 250% increase in your suite's monthly rent, effective 30 days from today. You can sign the new agreement and stay in your current space at the new rate, or you can vacate by the end of next month." My father looked at the document. He looked at it for a very long time. Then he looked up at me, and I saw something I had never seen on his face in 32 years. He looked small. Not physically. He was still the same broad-shouldered man who had always commanded every room he entered. But something behind the eyes, something that had always made him feel larger than the space he occupied, was gone. Gerald, my mother whispered. Say something. He did not speak. Vanessa stood up from the sofa. She turned to Derek, and her voice, when it came, was completely stripped of its earlier sweetness. Did you know about any of this? She demanded. Did you know she owned property here? Derek shook his head slowly. No. Then why did you let your father drag us here with this ridiculous plan? She snapped. If he had done a single hour of research before putting together this scheme, we would not be sitting in her hotel while she buries us in property deeds. Vanessa, my mother said sharply. Do not, Vanessa said, holding up one hand. Do not try to manage me right now, Patricia. We came here based on your husband's word that he had leverage. He told us this was a sure thing. He told us Sophia was vulnerable and that all we had to do was show up. And instead, she gestured broadly at the table full of documents. Instead, we are sitting across from someone who apparently owns half the city, and the plan your husband had was to threaten her with a landlord she already replaced a year ago. Derek sat back down in his chair and said nothing. My father finally moved. He reached out and picked up his original envelope from the table. He held it for a moment, and then he set it back down and pushed it slightly to the side. A small gesture. An admission. You would really do this, he said. His voice had lost its authority entirely. You would actually serve me an eviction notice. I looked at him steadily. You served me one 8 years ago, I said. You changed the locks and left me on the porch in October with no coat and no plan. I built everything I have from that night forward. I did not do it to punish you. I did it because I had no other option. But if you walk into my building and threaten to use my home against me, then yes, I will protect what is mine. A long pause. My mother pressed her hands flat against her knees. She seemed to be deciding something. Then she stood up, and when she spoke, her voice was not the performative softness from earlier. It was tired. We needed money, she said. That is the truth of it. Derek's business has been struggling for 2 years, and we have been quietly covering the difference. Gerald's firm lost 2 major accounts this fall. We came here because we did not know what else to do. She stopped. She did not look at me when she continued. I know what we did to you, Sophia. I have known for 8 years. I told myself we had reasons, that you were stubborn, that you brought it on yourself. I told myself a lot of things. She finally looked up, and her eyes were wet. But I also know that I stood in that hallway and I did not stop him. And I have never once picked up the phone to tell you I was sorry for it. The room was very quiet. I did not feel the wave of reconciliation I might have hoped for as a child. I felt instead something more honest. Sadness, clean and clear, for the version of her who had not been braver. And a solid, settled certainty that sadness was all I owed the moment. I appreciate you saying that, I told her. I mean that. But an apology delivered at the moment it becomes financially inconvenient to withhold is not the same as an apology that costs something. She nodded once. Slowly. She sat back down. My father had not moved or spoken again. He was staring at the document with the rent increase notice, and something in his posture had shifted from defiance to a kind of dull, blank recognition. Derek spoke then, quietly, almost to himself. I should not have come, he said. I told him it was a bad idea. He looked up at me briefly, and then away again. I am sorry, Sophia. I do not know if that matters to you at this point, but I am. I looked at my brother. He was not the monster of this story. He was something more complicated and less satisfying than a villain. He was a person who had spent his whole life letting our father make his choices for him, and the consequences were beginning to finally land on him in ways he could not avoid. It matters, I said simply. Vanessa was still standing near the sofa, her arms crossed, her expression pulled tight. She had gone very quiet in the way that people go quiet when they are rapidly reassessing. She looked at Derek, then at the documents on the table, then at me. For what it is worth, she said finally, I did not know about the trust fund, the $90,000 from your grandmother. I did not know until 6 months ago, and when Derek told me, I told him it was wrong. She said it flatly, not seeking credit for it, just saying it. I believed her. I did not know her well enough to be certain, but I believed her. I looked around at the 4 of them. My father, still and diminished. My mother, honest for the first time since I could remember. My brother, uncomfortable with the weight of the complicity he had carried. His wife, recalibrating with the particular speed of someone who has had to be practical her entire life. I have spent 8 years being very disciplined about what I owe each of you, I said. I do not owe you equity in my business. I do not owe you silence about the trust fund, which my attorney documented 3 years ago, and which could still be reported as fraud. I do not owe you warmth simply because we share a name. But I also did not build everything I have so that I could use it as a weapon. I reached down and slid the rent increase notice back toward me. I held it up once, and then I set it aside face down. I am not going to serve you that notice tonight, I said. Not because you deserve my mercy, but because it would not actually give me anything I want. My father's eyes came up to mine. What I want is for all of you to understand clearly what happened 8 years ago, I said. You stole from me. You stole my grandmother's money. You stole my home, and you stole 8 years of what could have been a family. You built nothing with what you took from me. And I built all of this without it. I closed the folder. The month-to-month lease on your office space stands as is, I told my father. The rent increase notice is on the table. If your firm can operate without that building, find somewhere else. If it cannot, come back with a long-term lease proposal, and my property manager will review it like any other application. Your history with me will not be a factor in that review. Business is business. I looked at Derek. If you want to build something real, build it. I am not an investor for your ideas, but I am also not your enemy. If you ever want honest advice from someone who has actually run a profitable business, you can ask me. That offer does not come with strings. I looked at my mother last. I hope you find a way to be honest with yourself about what happened, I said. Not for me, for you. Because carrying a lie that long is its own kind of prison. I picked up the folder. I straightened it once against the edge of the table. The sitting room is available for another 20 minutes, I said. After that, Bree can call a car for anyone who needs it. I have a hotel to run. I walked back through the corridor, through the warmth of the lobby, past the bar where the guests were still laughing quietly and the candles were still burning low and clean, and I stepped behind the front desk where Bree was waiting with the careful, held-breath expression of someone who had heard just enough to know that something significant had occurred on the other side of that frosted glass. "Are you okay?" she asked. I set the folder on the shelf beneath the desk. I straightened the stack of check-in cards. I looked up at the small television above the bar, where a late sports recap was running with the sound turned off. I am, I said. I genuinely am. The weeks that followed settled into something quieter than I had expected. I had spent so many years anticipating a confrontation of one kind or another that I had not fully prepared for the way life continues, simply and without ceremony, once the confrontation is finally over. My father's firm signed a standard 2-year lease for their suite on the 8th floor of the Demonbrunn building 2 weeks later. The rate was fair market. My property manager handled the paperwork. I did not attend the signing. Derek and Vanessa did not move forward with any partnership proposal, which was not a surprise. What was a surprise was a text message I received from Derek about 3 weeks after that evening, asking whether I knew any commercial kitchen rental spaces in Nashville. He had spent a year developing a barbecue sauce line in his home kitchen, and he was looking to scale it properly. I sent him 2 contacts. He thanked me. We have not spoken at length since, but it was something. A thread, the kind that takes years to determine whether it holds weight or breaks under pressure. My mother called once, on a Sunday morning, and we talked for 22 minutes about nothing much. She asked about the hotel. I told her the October occupancy rate. She told me her neighbor's dog had had puppies. It was not a reconciliation. It was also not nothing. I was in my office on the 2nd floor one morning in late November, about a month after that evening, working through a proposal for a second property I had been watching in the Gulch neighborhood. The sunrise was coming through the window and laying gold stripes across the surface of my desk, and my coffee was still hot, and the hotel below me was quiet with the particular calm of an early weekday morning before the city fully wakes up. I had built this place because I had no other choice. When you are 24 years old with 2 suitcases and $62 and a door closed in your face, you do not build a plan. You build a survival. And then, slowly, you start building something more. You learn the city at ground level. You take the jobs nobody else wants. You study the markets at midnight because there is nothing else to do with the hours you cannot sleep. You save with a discipline that looks unreasonable to people who have always had a floor beneath them, because you know exactly what it feels like to have none. I did not become a hotel owner because I was exceptional. I became one because I refused to believe that the story they told about me was true. They called me a burden. They called me difficult. They called me a person who could not survive without their protection. And every single morning for 8 years, I had the opportunity to either confirm or disprove that narrative with whatever I decided to do next. I signed the paperwork for the new property that morning. 2 weeks later, I was back at the Hartwell Inn desk at 9 in the evening, going through reservation confirmations, when Bree handed me a small envelope that had arrived in the afternoon mail. It had no return address. Inside was a birthday card, the kind you pick up at a drugstore with a watercolor flower on the front. My birthday was not for another 6 weeks. Inside, in my mother's handwriting, were 11 words. I should have opened the door. I am sorry. I love you. I set the card on the corner of my desk and looked at it for a while. I did not cry. Exactly. But I sat with it in a way that was not nothing. I thought about Ruth, my grandmother, sitting in her small house with her careful savings and her clear eyes, deciding that the person in this family worth investing in was me. I thought about what it means to be seen by one person when all the others have decided not to look. I put the card in the top drawer of my desk and went back to the reservation confirmations. The hotel was fully booked for the weekend. The kitchen had a new sous chef who was extraordinary with the breakfast menu. The bar manager had sourced a local distillery partnership that was drawing genuine attention. The Gulch property was going through inspection. Everything I had was built from what they threw away. There is something I want to say to anyone listening to this who has been told by the people closest to you that you are too much, too difficult, too stubborn to deserve the room they were taking up in your life. Being pushed out is not the same as being wrong. Being cut off is not the same as being unworthy. The people who discarded you were not accurate judges of your value. They were people in pain, people in debt, people who needed something from you that you had every right not to give. And their decision to make you pay for that refusal is the single most honest thing they ever showed you about who they were. You are allowed to build without their approval. You are allowed to succeed in a direction they cannot follow. And when they come back, as they often do, you are allowed to decide, quietly and entirely on your own terms, what they get to be part of and what they do not. My family came to my hotel expecting to find the girl they left on the porch. Instead, they found her landlord. If you have ever rebuilt yourself from the ground up after someone you trusted tried to bury you, I want to hear from you in the comments. Tell me what you built. Hit subscribe and come back, because there are more stories here. And every one of them belongs to someone who refused to stay down.